All right.
I didn't do a dedication. I forgot. Can you just say the rest
Yeah.
of one? I'll put one in.
Perfect. Perfect.
For today.
Perfect. All right, I want to say good morning. Good morning. It is a schos Baruch Hashem to be able to close out our week together with Bava Basra. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors, our annual Talmud Torah sponsor for Taf Shin Pei Hey for the year 5785, the Tilsim Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael for dedicating all the Shumer and Drashos this year as a schos for Besaros Tavos for Am Yisrael. Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, Josh and Becca Friedman, the commemoration of the yard site of Josh's father, Yisrael Yehuda, Ben Rav Chaim Rafal, Zichrono Livracha, and for the schus of the safe return of our hostages and the security of all of our Chayalim. Semi and Malka Esterson, in memory of their parents, Ludwig Stiefel, Sarah Stiefel, and Hinda Esterson, and in memory of their beloved dear friend and brave soldier, Naftali Gordon, Naftali Yona, Ben Dani, and Betty Gordon Sheyichyu, who was killed by sniper fire while in his tank in Gaza on Erev Chanukah. And Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Said and Sima Haken, in commemoration of the end of the 11 months of Kaddish for Said's mother, Taji Bas Harav Meir Moshe Dayanim, and Matt and Diane Marks, in honor of the double bris of their grandsons this morning. B'sha'a tova u'metzlachas, may they be zocha, Me'eretz Hashem, to enter into briso sh'Av Avinu bizmano, and may their parents be zocha, l'gal l'torah l'chopel l'maisim tovim. And the schools of our learning in Me'eretz Hashem, may our hostages come home b'shalom and b'karov, and may our holy soldiers be successful b'chol ma'aseh yedehem. And with that, let us begin. A lot to do today. Well, not so much to do today, just a lot more compared to what we had the last couple of days. So today's daf is Kuf Samech Daled 164. We are picking up Me'eretz Hashem on the bottom of Kuf Samech Gimel 163b, 2 lines up from the bottom. So Gemara says as follows: Gufa Amarav Shtar Haba Hu Ve'edav Alamacha Kasha. So let's remember again, we actually had this Gemara a couple of days ago. Actually, when I say a couple of days ago, yesterday. So the Rav said as follows, that if you have a shtar and hu ve'edav ala machak. So we'll say, remember again, we dabbled a little bit in what is the status of a shtar that's been erased. Or I should say, remember again, really it's parchment that's been erased. So obviously the nice part about parchment is you could tell whether or not there's been an erasure on the parchment itself. So Rav holds that halacha l'maisa, if you have a shtar, and the shtar itself and the witnesses are on an erased piece of parchment, ultimately kosher. The shtar is kosher. Rav feels that halacha l'maisa, because the erasure has been on the entire shtar, therefore halacha l'maisa, one need not be concerned. Tab of Kuf Samech Daled. V'im Tomar Mochek v'chozer me'mochek. But 1 second, maybe you should be concerned that halacha l'maisa. So we'll say, so now you say to yourself like this. See, when do I have to get concerned a little bit? If you look at a shtar, and let's say you see the top, where let's say the text is erased, and the bottom is not. Okay, so then that maybe looks a little bit weird. Or the top is not erased, and the bottom is erased. So when there's incongruity between the two parts of the shtar, the text and where the witnesses are signed, I understand why that may lead to a little bit of confusion. But what Rav is saying is that halacha l'maisa, if the entire shtar is erased, then, again, remember, when I say the entire shtar is erased, if the entire shtar is written on an erased piece of parchment, then there's no real concern about forgery, because again, this is just a shtar that's been erased, or a parchment that's been erased, and now the shtar is being written on erased parchment. I will mention that, I've been thinking a lot about this over the last few days, that this, all of these Gemaras about erased parchment are very reminiscent of the Mishnah Avos. The Mishnah Avos actually that quotes Elisha ben Avuya. And Elisha ben Avuya says, Halomed Yeled, if one learns as a child, Lemahu Doma, to what can he be compared? Lidio Kasuv al Niyar Chadash. It's comparable to ink written on a clean piece of parchment. And halomed, right? If a person learns as an adult, halomed zaki l'ma'al doma. If a person, it's lidio kasuv al niyar machuk. Right? So if you learn at an older stage, it is compared to ink written on erased parchment. And there's a lot, so it's this fascinating distinction. If you learn when you're young, it is as if you are writing ink on clean parchment. Learn when you're old, it's as if you're putting ink on erased parchment. So Pasha Pshat, what's Pasha Pshat? So Pasha Pshat is when you have new parchment, so the ink seeps in much better. Hey, erased parchment, remember again, when you ever see what happens when how do you erase parchment? How do you erase it? You scrape it. So it's true, you end up going in and taking away the ink. What else do you end up taking away? Part of the parchment, which means now it's thinner. So because it's thinner, the ink isn't absorbed. The ink isn't absorbed as well. So that's b'pashtas. It can be just the din in what we'll call intellectual absorption. When you're young, you're like a sponge. You take in everything. When you're old, well, okay. What were we talking about, right? So right? When you're old, the parchment is not a stake. But of course, on a deeper level, what it's also saying is like this: as we get old, we have to keep on erasing the parchment over and over and over again, right? We start again. It's part of the beauty. Part of the beauty is, you can erase the parchment as many times as you need to. But when you're young, Baruch Hashem, you have the great zechus of just having a brand new parchment that doesn't need to be erased. Everything is perfect. I'm thinking of this. The Artman Chavrusa is back again on Zoom in the NICU at Sinai Hospital, and Bakshan this time Moshe David doesn't have the earphones on, so now it's just us. And now our mom is learning. You think about, I'm not calling Moshe David in the Yarmoch Chas V'Shalom, but I'm saying incredible. Like, so you see a baby. The beauty of a baby is that Niyar Chadash, that beautiful, just untainted piece of parchment that's never been erased. It's just perfect. It's just beautiful. It's just pristine. So the Sfas Emes brings down, he says, this is a beautiful Mishnah, but the problem is, it's beautiful if you learn it when you're young. It's not so beautiful if you learn it when you're old, right? So what do I do with this? Now that's what I'm going to erase piece of parchment. Shabbos said this is a good piece of Torah to learn right now. The Sfas Emes says, don't despair. He says, every single day, you are a Niyar Chadash. See, often we look at time as linear. So when I was born and when I was young, I was a brand new piece of parchment. Now I'm an older piece of parchment, a erased piece of parchment. So someone says that's not how it works. Every day the clock is reset. And so every morning when I wake up, I am a brand new piece of parchment, which I think about this just a moment. You might not feel like a brand new piece of parchment right now. You might feel a little worn and weathered and exhausted, but on a spiritual level, each of us is a brand new piece of parchment right now. And the day has just begun, and what's going to happen on the parchment, what's going to be written on the parchment, what's going to be erased on the parchment, all of that is yet to be determined. The great zechus of opening your eyes every single day is the zechus of having a brand new piece of parchment. Anyway, let's go right there. So that's all of our talk about erased parchment, new parchment. I've been thinking about this Mishnah a lot over the last few days. Anyway, so the Mishnah says as follows. So Rav says, if you write the shtar on an erased piece of parchment, you're good to go. Top of Kuf Samach Dalet. I says the Gemara ben Tomar, Mochek, the Choser of Mochek. But 1 second, doesn't this open things up, Lemaisa, again, to more tampering? Why? Because what you say like this, watch this, if Reuven's already writing a shtar on an erased piece of parchment, what's to stop him after he writes the shtar from erasing it again? Right? In other words, he's already got some, again, Reuven lent Shimon $10,000. So now it's on an erased piece of parchment. Rav says totally fine. So now what happens? What's to stop Reuven from erasing the text again, and now writing in it that Reuven lent Shimon $15,000. And remember, you can't view that it's been tampered with. Why not? Because the parchment has already been erased once before. To which the Gemara says, no. So you can't compare a parchment that's been erased once to parchment that's been erased twice. So apparently you could see on parchment the number of erasures. So therefore, again, if the text is written on a piece of parchment that's been erased twice, and the Eidim have signed on a piece of parchment that's been erased once, so Lemais, again, you can see the difference there. Because that difference is visible, ultimately, if there is any type of tampering, you'll be able to see it. I will say, I would just mention that on a spiritual level, it's just the opposite. You see, in a shtar, the more you erase it, the more you can see it. It's true in life also. The more you erase your personal parchment, the more it's visible. Just the difference is, in a shtar, it usually says the parchment becomes a little bit worn. On a personalistic level, the more times in life you find the courage to erase your parchment and to start again, the better and stronger and more beautiful your personal parchment is. The Gemara goes right to V'leichosh Dilma Shadi Diyusa Makom Eidin Meikara. Okay, so we'll say, so now this is interesting. So maybe Ruvain, right? Ruvain wants to tamper with the shtar. Now Ruvain is thinking ahead, right? Ruvain is thinking ahead. So he has this chap. He says like this. Takes a piece of parchment, right? He goes ahead and he puts ink on the spot where the ink is going to be. Right, where the ink is going. Sorry, he puts ink. Sorry, in the spot where the witnesses are going to sign. All right, umachikle, and he erases it. Now, watch what he's doing. He erases it. So now he's already got one erasure in the spot of the witnesses. Okay, essentially, what the Gemara is pointing out over here is there is a way to manipulate this, right? There is a way to go ahead and essentially make it so that essentially he's going to pre-erase the spot of the witnesses, so that this way, again, remember, the shtar itself is already going to be erased once. Essentially, he's going to make sure that the shtar is erased twice, the makom edim, so that when he wipes out the text and he erases the text area a second time, both parts of the shtar will have effectively been erased twice. So he could tamper with it. To which the Gemara says, Abaye kasavarav ein ha'idim chosmin ala machak. So it's interesting. So no, Rav holds that if witnesses are going to sign on erased parchment, they're only going to sign if the erasure took place in front of them. In other words, you got to be smart. If you're signing on a brand new piece of parchment, that's one thing. But if you're signing on a parchment that has been erased, Eidim won't do it, unless, of course, the erasure of the parchment has taken place in their presence, and therefore they understand exactly what the circumstances are. Okay, Macy, so both sides, this is the sheet of Rav. Now remember again, not everybody holds of Rav, so many hold that once parchment has been erased, you really can't use it anymore for shtaras, because it just leaves itself too open to tampering and to forgery. But Rav is of the opinion that Allah Lamaisa, as long as both the witnesses and the shtar itself is being written on erased parchment, it's kosher. Totally fine. Okay, so Mesa, the Gemara is the kasha. Hu al haniyar ve'edav al hamachak. So I'll say Saloch now raise the kasha. What happens if hu al haniyar, which means that lemaisa, the shtar itself, the information is on niyar, right, which is on unerased parchment, ve'edav al hamachak, and the witnesses are signing on the erasure. On the erasure, what's the halacha? Kosher. Ultimately, again, it's mutter. It's mutter. The Gemara says 1 second. So again, I will say, so this is hual niyar ve'edav al hamachak. So in this case over here, right, shtar itself is being written on regular parchment. Witnesses are signing on an erased part of parchment. What's the halacha? Kosher. I Gemara says 1 second. So we'll say this is pretty dangerous. Why is this dangerous? Because what does this leave it open to? The witnesses are already signed on an erased piece of parchment. So now, technically speaking, what Reuven could do is what? Erase the text, write in whatever he wants, and now again, the erased part of the text will match the erased part where the witness is signed. And you've just tampered with the shtar, no one could ever see. So the Gemara says, and Allah again, now this becomes a case of both where the text and the witnesses signed on the erasure. To which the Gemara says, no. Diksivi hachi anachno sahadi chasamna amachaka ushtara kasav al niyara. No. In a case like this, I will say, listen to this. In a case like this, where the witnesses are signing on the erasure, and the document is being written on non-erased parchment, the witnesses write in the text. We, the witnesses, signed on erased parchment, but the text itself was written on non-erased parchment. So they write that in. And therefore, again, because they're writing that in, if you see then that subsequently the text is written on erased parchment, what does that show? It's been tampered with. Okay, so the Gemara says, the Gemara wonders, okay, where exactly is this being written? Right, so where is this being written? In other words, where the witness is writing this explanation. So Rabbi says, so remember again, if halacha l'maisa, they're writing this below their signatures, that's not going to work. Why? Because you could just lop that off. I'll say again, Ramat and I were talking about this before this year. Just understand, parchment, remember they're talking about parchment over here. Parchment is not mass produced, which means that parchment, you had to cut parchment regardless, which also meant that parchment also came in different shapes and sizes. So remember again, you would not necessarily be able to tell that parchment was tampered with by having something cut off. It's just, I don't know, it's a shorter piece of parchment, right? Or a wider piece of parchment, whatever it is. So the point over here is, if they're writing this explanation below their signatures, then halacha l'maisa, what's to stop Reuven from simply just lopping it off? And if they're writing it above their signatures, then what can Reuven do? Erase it. Because we'll say, remember again what's happening in this case over here. In this case, halacha l'maisa, the document is being written on an erased piece of parchment, on the erased piece of the parchment, and the witnesses are being written on a non-erased. Remember, this is one piece of parchment. The top was erased, the bottom was not erased. The top has the text, the bottom has the signatures of the witnesses. So now we're saying, don't worry about it. The witnesses are going to write in the shtar, we the witnesses signed on this, but please be aware, the top of the parchment on which the information is being written, that was erased, right? It was written on erased parchment. We're signing on a non-erased piece of parchment. The Gemara says, okay, where you're writing that? If you're writing it below their signatures, then you could just lop it off. If you're writing it above their signatures, it could be erased. And you won't be able to detect that there was an erasure. Why not? Why not? Because anyway, the top of the document was an erased piece of parchment. So how does this explanation help? To which the Gemara says, no, diksivi bein sahada l'sahada. So this is very interesting. Where do you write the explanation? Where do you write the explanation? Between the signatures of the witnesses. So now watch this. Essentially, so the way this shtar would be structured is as follows. So let's say the transaction itself is Reuven lent Shimon $10,000. Now that information, right, the tofes, the toref, the boiler part plate of the shtar, the transactional specific part of the shtar, is all written on the top of the parchment, and that part of the parchment happened to have been pre-erased. It was erased already before, so you're writing on it. Afterwards, what do you have? Again, maybe a hakol shari v'kayim, so whatever. Then you have the signatures of the witnesses. The part where the witnesses signed, that part of the parchment had never been erased before. So that's like brand new parchment. So what happens? First line you write, Zvulun ben Yaakov, and the second line you write Yitzchak ben Avram. Those are the two witnesses, right? Line 1, line 2. In between those two lines, the witness is right in there, and by the way, this shtar, the text was written on erased parchment, and we, the witnesses, signed on non-erased new parchment. And you write it there, because we'll say why? Because it's written between the signatures, you can't really tamper with that. You can't cut it out. Why not? Because if you cut it out, there's going to be a blank space in between the signatures of the witnesses. You can't erase it, because it's going to be clear that it was tampered with. And therefore, again, that ensures that if subsequently someone tries to do something with the shtar, you'll see ultimately again that it's been tampered with. Ihachi, ema seifa. You look at the seifa. Hu ala machak ve'idav al aniyar. What about the following case? What about the case of where the document itself is written on the erased part? And, I'm sorry, right, so we've been talking about a case, I'm sorry, I reversed it. Our case was talking about where the document itself was written on the new parchment and the witnesses were signing on the erased part. What about the second case? Hu ala machak ve'idav al aniyar, where ultimately, again, the shtar itself is written on clean parchment and the witnesses are written on the erased part. Puzzle. So halacha is this puzzle. So am I puzzle? Why should it be puzzle? Remember again, I'm sorry, I was reversing the cases. In the case we've been dealing with right beforehand, the shtar itself, right, the information was written on new parchment. The witnesses signed on erased parchment. So what are we concerned about in that case? What's our concern? Let's just play this out. What's our concern? Our concern is this is ripe for manipulation. Because what could Reuven come along and do? Erase all of the text on top, right, and rewrite the details of the transaction. Reuven lent Shimon $10,000. He can erase it now and write that he lent Shimon $15,000, and you'll never detect the tampering. Why not? Because now the shtar actually just looks uniform, because now the entire thing is just written on erased parchment. To which the Gemara says, no. What do we do in a case like that? The witnesses write an explanation where? In between their signatures. And what does the explanation say? We signed on a document, and when we signed on this document, our part was erased. The text was written on non-erased parchment. Okay, so that's it. That's your insurance policy. So if somebody presents that shtar and it turns out that the text is written on erased parchment, it's clear that what? It's been tampered with. The Gemara says, good. Makes a lot of sense. But if that works, why doesn't it work in the other case, in the opposite case? What about the case where the shtar is written on erased parchment, right? And the witnesses are signing on non-erased parchment. So the halacha is, the right says, pasal, amai, hachi nami nichtevu hachi. So why can't you say in this case also, let the witnesses write an explanation? What's the explanation? Anachna sahadi chasamna al niyara ushtara amachka. So let them just write in between their signatures, we the witnesses signed on regular parchment, right? But the actual shtar itself was written on erased parchment. So why not just go ahead and say that? To which the Gemara says, "My armet," because what are you concerned about? Mochek chozer umochek. What are you concerned about? That perhaps that halacha l'maisa, maybe in this case. So perhaps, like we said before, perhaps if Reuben knows that he wants to manipulate this, what he'll do is he'll go ahead and he'll erase the spot where the Eidim are going to go ahead and sign, right? And then afterwards, again, he can erase again, and therefore make the shtar look uniform. We already said that's not a problem. We already said before that halacha l'maaseh, it's not going to work. Why? Because I will say, interestingly enough, you could tell on a shtar, you could tell on a piece of parchment what's been erased once versus what's been erased more than once. To which the Gemara says, no. Hanimili heicha de chasimi sahadi amachka. So when can you tell ultimately again when something's been erased once versus been erased twice? That's when halacha l'maaseh, the witnesses are signing on the erased part. Heicha de lo chasimi sahada amachka ela aniyara lo yidia. But halacha l'maaseh again, when they're not signing on the erased part, but rather they're signing on the non-erased part, it's going to go ahead and be very difficult to contrast. So the Gemara says, 1 second. So why not just go ahead and bring another parchment? In other words, we're both saying, who says the contrast has to happen within the same piece of parchment? Let the contrast happen from two different pieces of parchment. In other words, line up an erased piece of parchment versus a non-erased piece of parchment, or even for that matter, a piece of parchment that's been erased once versus twice. So just line them up. Both say very profound Gemara. Lo dami machka dahamagilta lemachka dahamagilta. So we'll say the erasure of one piece of parchment does not compare to the erasure of another piece of parchment. So we'll say, so very interesting. Again, so you have to appreciate this, right? That we often think, okay, parchment's like paper, right? Their parchment is like our paper. So it's true from a utilitarian perspective, from a usage perspective, but from a production perspective, every piece of parchment is its own thing. See, even the way parchment erases, the erasure of one piece of parchment will not look like the erasure of the other piece of parchment. We'll say a very profound Musar Haskell as well. If we keep going with this motif, that erased parchment, the parchment is the yid, and the erasure of the parchment represents the ability to start over in life. Every person's parchment is different. And your erasure looks different than my erasure. Your tshuva is one process, my tshuva is another process. And what it takes for me to erase my parchment is a fundamentally different process for you to erase your parchment. No two pieces of parchment are the same. They don't erase the same. They don't undergo the same process. Really incredible. I v'lekablo lechasimos yada. So else is very interesting. V'lekablo lechasimos yada desad v'vedina v'limchok v'lidmi. So the Gemara says, okay, so if you have a shaila about the shtar whether or not it's been tampered with, why don't you do like this? Essentially, look at the signatures. Look at the signatures. And then go ahead, so literally accept the signatures, essentially do like a kiyum shtaris. Do like a kiyum shtaris of the signatures in Beis Din. Go ahead, if you look at the Rashbam says, when a kabel chasim is dai bebeidina, shlo yafsid balashtar edos shel edov, ve'achar kach nimchok v'nichtov bahim gilta gufa v'nedamye. So we'll say, so essentially, look at the signatures, examine the signatures, study the signatures, do that in Beis Din. So that way Beis Din has record of the signatures, then, so therefore you don't lose out on the shtar, and then erase it. And see how that erasure compares to the erasure of the rest of the document. So see if it's been tampered with that way. Rabbi Moshe says, no, eno nimchak ben yomo lenimchak ben shnei yamim. So we'll say this is fascinating. It turns out that really shtaros are quite complicated, or at least parchment is really complicated. So it turns out that an erasure done today looks different than an erasure that's been done in the past. See, even on the same shtar, if the erasure took place at different times, it's not going to look the same. The Gemara says, I velishie. So if that's the case, so erase it and let it sit in Beis Din a little bit. Age it, and see over time if the erasure looks the same. Amri Rabbi Yirmiyah chayshinu lebeis din toa. No, this is very dangerous, right? We're very dangerous. We'll say, if you have a compromised shtar or a chashash of a compromised shtar, we are very concerned in general about just letting that sit, and of concern that a Beis Din that may not fully comprehend the halacha may end up utilizing it or allowing for it without necessarily going through the process of seeing if indeed it is a proper shtar. I will say, by the way, that also in the same motif, this idea that an erasure of one day is different than an erasure of 2 days. I will say, the halacha is that, the hashkafa is, I should say, the longer I wait to erase my parchment, the more different it looks. Sometimes if I know that an erasure needs to happen, I know that I need a new start, I know that I need a new beginning, I know that there's just certain things I need to get rid of. The longer I wait, the more different the parchment looks even after the erasure occurs. Sometimes in life, if I know that a change needs to be made, bless you, the best thing I could do is make it right now. Incredible. So I'll say in any event, the point that the Gemara makes is that halacha l'maaseh, you're not really going to be able to tell whether or not it's been actively been tampered with. So bottom line, what do we do with all of this? So I'll say, so of course, therefore what comes out of this is the ideal is don't use erased parchment. Or if you're going to use erased parchment, halacha is really going to follow Rav, which says either all or nothing. Either all or nothing. In other words, if you want to use an erased piece of parchment, that's fine, as long as it is erased from top to bottom. And therefore, again, the entire shtar is written on a piece of erased parchment. Aren't we concerned that halacha l'maisa, you may erase you may erase the text again and write something new? No, we're not concerned about that. Why? It's according to Rav. Why? Because something that's been erased twice looks different than something that's been erased once. So I will say that seems to be the way the Gemara is passing halacha l'maisa, with one other exception. The other case that the Gemara seems to feel would work, I will say, is the case of where halacha l'maisa, the part of the text has been erased, and where the edim are signing is not erased. Because in that case, you also have the ability to protect against tampering. How? By that little message that's written in between the signatures. Because there you have a tamper-proof shtar, because the witnesses could write, by the way, we signed on the shtar, and when we signed on it, halacha l'maisa, the top of the text was unerased, and the area of our signatures was erased. So halacha l'maisa, that seems to work as well. Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. So we'll say back to the Mishnah. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Omer Mekusher. So we'll say, remember again, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel said the following. So remember, we'll say, once upon a time we were talking about a get mekusher versus a get pashat. Right? These two different types of documents. So if you remember again, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel said, mekusher shekasvu edav mitocho kasher b'bnei shiachal asos pashat. So if you remember again, one of the major distinctions we had between a get pashat and a get mekusher was that a get pashat, the witness is signed on the front. Get mekusher, the witness is signed on the back. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel said, it's no problem if you made a mistake and you went ahead and you wrote the signatures of the witnesses on the front of a get mekusher. Not a problem. Why? You could just make it into a pashat. Just make it into a pashat. In other words, you could transform it into a pashat. Fine. So let's analyze this. So the Gemara says, Heishiv Rabbi l'div Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. So Rabbi raised the kasha. Rabbi raised the kasha. So if you look, before you turn the page, look at the last Rashbam. Hey, Shiv Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, Shamar Mekusher Yachal Asos Pasha. So we'll say, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel's entire yisod is that halacha l'maisa, you can make a get Mekusher into a get Pashat. That's essentially his idea. So again, I made a mistake. I put the witnesses on the front side of the shtar instead of the back side of the shtar. Rabbi says, no problem, just make the makusher into a pashat. So Rebbe asked on this, Hey Shiv, Rebbe, the Rebbe Chanim Gamliel, Amud Beis, Valo ino dom zmano shel zeh, lizmano shel zeh. Oh, so Rebbe says, one second. There's a problem. What's the problem? Rebbe say there are a number of distinctions between a get pashat and a get makusher. One of them is the dating system. How they would date a get makusher was different than how they would date a get pashat. How so? So let's listen to this. Pashat, second line from the top, 164b. Pashat, malach shana monin lo shana. So both say, so remember again, the way they would date a shtar is in accordance with the year of the monarchy. So again, when we were in Eretz Yisrael, there was a Jewish monarchy, so you dated by the year of the king. But again, that dating system would apply even when we were living under a Gentile monarchy. So therefore, the Gemara says, in the Pashat, malach shana, monin lo shana. Say if the king reigned for a year, so they would put year one of the reign of the king in the shtar. Okay, shtayim, monin lo shtayim, fine. So we'll say pretty straightforward. So in a get pashat, you would date in accordance with the year of the king. Makushar, malach shana, monin lo shtayim. It's interesting. And again, makushar, if the king reigned for 1 year, you would put in the shtar the second year of the king. So it was King X, right? So in the shtar, in the get makushar, right, in the second year of the reign of King X, even though it was only his first year. Shtayim, monin lo shtayim, makushar, malach shana, monin lo shtayim. Shtayim, monin lo gimel. So both say similarly again. So this was the way they would did it in a get makusher. Now both say. Now what I want to point out over here, something very interesting is they would do this. This was common not only in the get makusher, but some dated their documents this way. This was like a way of giving kavod to the king. What you're showing essentially is you're confident in the prolonged rulership of the king. So confident that I'm even dating a year ahead. But again, this was understood. In a get pashit, you used the year of the actual reign. In a get makusher, you used the year of the actual plus one. Plus one. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. V'alo ein zmano shel pashat kizmano shel makusher. Dilo zmano shel pashat im nichtav b'shana rishona shamar hamelech ein monin lo ela shana shtayim. Monin lo shtayim. Aval makusher im malach shana kosvin b'shtar kasav b'shtar shtayim. Kasav b'shtar shtayim. Shtayim monin lo shalosh. Kilomar makdim lo shana. Shrei minaga umakit lekaman lahagdim lemelech shana. V'shema lekavod hamelech hayu osekain. So we'll say, so the Rashbam says this was done out of deference to the king. So the Gemara says, so you see where the kasha is, right? So the Gemara makes it sound like so pashit. That's not a big deal. If you made a mistake and you wrote the witnesses, instead of putting the get witnesses on the back side of the makusher, you put it on the front side of the makusher. No problem. Just turn the makusher into a pasha. Whoa, the dating system is different. A get pashut has the year of the actual reign. A get makusher has the year of the actual reign plus one. So the dating systems are different. Now both saying, now this could be exploited. How so? Watch this. So we'll say, now watch this. Let's say Ruvain lent Shimon $10,000, right? And he used the get makusher. And what happened? So the Gemara says, and now what happened? Now in the interim, so let's say he lent it for 5 years. Now in the interim, Shimon got money and Shimon paid back the debt. So what happens? So Shimon pays back the debt, and of course, if you pay back the debt, what do you want back? You want back the document. So Shimon says to Reuven, give me back my shtar. Reuven says, I'm so sorry, I lost the shtar. Now Reuven didn't lose the shtar. Reuven has the shtar, as you're going to see in just a moment, he has a plan. So v'kas of late tavra. Okay, so if you don't have a shtar, what do you write? You write a receipt. And the receipt says that Shimon paid Ruvain, $10,000. And what happened? V'chimate's money mashvile pashat. So I'll say, so now what happens when the actual date, the due date of the shtar comes about? So Ruvain converts the makusher into a pashat. Now, remember again, the makusher is dated for a year later. for a year later. The Amrle, Hani Hashta Diazafta Minoi, Kasavar, I'm sorry, Hani Hashta Diazafta Minoi. So what could Reuven do? Reuven could go ahead and say, oh, Shimon, you owe me the money. Shimon could say, 1 second, what are you talking about? I paid you back. Here's my receipt. Reuven could say, no, that was a different transaction. Yeah, you paid me back for an earlier loan. This is a later loan. After all, look at the date of the shtar, right? The shtar is, because remember again, in a makusher, it's dated what? A year later. So if you have the ability to go ahead and convert a makusher into a pashut, can't this be easily manipulated? Because now essentially a person has a shtar me'ocher. A shtar has a document, a person has a shtar that is dated quote unquote 1 year later than the actual transaction. To which the Gemara says, no. Kasavra in kosin shover. He holds we don't write receipts. Everyone will say, what does it mean we don't write receipts? So I'll say, remember, if you don't write receipts, what that means is Shimon is not going to pay back Reuven unless, of course, what? He hands him over the shtar. So, okay, you don't have a shtar. You lost the shtar. No problem. I'm not paying you. I will only pay you once I go ahead and get the shtar back. So as long as Shimon gets the shtar back, obviously there's no manipulation. Umi Baki Rabbi Makosher. So we'll say, is Rabbi such an expert in a get Makosher? Vahahu Makosher, das lakamid Rabbi. He'll say there was this case of a get Makosher that came before Rabbi. Va'amar Rabbi, shtar me'ocher zeh. Rabbi said, the date is wrong. This is a shtar me'ocher. We'll say shtar me'ocher means a post-dated shtar. Now, you're not allowed to write a post-dated shtar. So Rabbi says shtar me'ocher. Va'amr lei zonin l'Rebbe kach min haga shal umazu. So Zonin said to Rabbi, no, Rabbi, you don't understand. This is how we date a get makosher. This is actually the dating practices of the Greeks. How would the Greeks date their shtaros? Malach shana monin lo shtayim, shtayim monin lo shalosh. The halacha l'maisa again, they would do the year of the actual rain plus 1. So the point of here says, you see, that Rebbe didn't know this about a get makosher. So how do we assume that Rebbe was such a bucky that Rebbe knew about a get makosher? The Gemara says, you're right. Basra the Shaim is on a savra. He wasn't an expert. And then what happened? He learned. But after learning also in life, you only know what you know. So once upon a time, beforehand, Rebbe did not know about a get makosher. Then after this episode, he learned about a get makosher. And after he learned about it, he became proficient. The Gemara tells the story. Hahu shtar the havikasa be bishnas ploni archon. So there was a shtar, and it was dated in accordance of the year of the reign of Archon. That was the lashon of Archon. So the Gemara says, Am Rabbi Chanina, Yibadek a Masai Amad Archon, Ba'archonusei. So we'll say, so here's the issue. The issue is that was the date of the shtar, right? The date of the shtar was in the year of the reign of Archon. So Rabbi Chanina says, okay, Archon, let's see when this guy Archon reigned, see when he reigned, and again, you'll be able to line up the date with the year of his reign, and you'll know exactly when the day of the shtar is. To which the Vidilma, the Arach Malchuse, maybe Archon ultimately, again, is not the name of a particular ruler, but rather it's descriptive. Arach, long. And maybe what it's saying is, in the year of the reign of our ruler, who we hope rules for a very long time, Raboshia, Kach min Haga Shalumazu. Raboshia said, because this is the minhag. This is the minhag ultimately. If you take a look at the Rashbam, for just Rashbam, well, let's see. So the Kach min Haga Shal Umazu, Shana Rishona Koran Lo Archon. So we'll say it's interesting. This is the way they had these dating systems, and this is the way they would refer to their rulers, right? And Shaluma Zu, Bepashtos in this context means the Greeks, right? This is how the Greeks would date their documents. B'shana Rishona, Karan la Archon. So I'll say in the first year of a ruler's reign, they would call him Archon. So once again, this is like a tefillah, right? That he should rule for a long time. Shnia, Karan lo Digon. In year number two, they would call him Digon. Digon. One second. Maybe what happened with this ruler is maybe they deposed him and then they put him back, they reinstated him into his rulership. So maybe even though it's going to call him Archon, it's not really year 1 of his reign, but really again it's year 2 of his reign. Rabbi Yirmiyah Hahu Archon Digon Karile. That guy, they would call him Archon Digon. Okay, so what happened if you saw an Archon Digon? Archon Digon means that what? It's year 2, which is really year 1 of his reinstated reign. Okay, Tan Rabbanon, Harini Nazir. So we'll say, so now listen to this. Let's say a guy says, I'm a Nazir. This guy says, I'm a Nazir. So remember, we'll say, Stam Nedr Naziros. Stam Nedr Naziros. Unqualified Naziros term is how long? 30 days. So watch this. So if you just say Hareini Nazir, the assumption is 30 days. Now Gemara is going to talk about if you add in different qualifiers. So Hareini Nazir, so the Gemara says, Sumchos Amar Hina Achas. If you say Hareini Nazir Hina, right? So Hina means one, I'm a Nazir Hina. That means you're a Nazir for one term. Digon, if you say I'm a Nazir Digon, Shtayim. So we'll say these are just descriptive terms. And remember, these were Greek terms that ultimately again refer to the duration of the rulership of their king. So again, if you use these Lashonos by Neder Nazirus, it qualifies the length of your Neder Nazir. So if you say Hareini Nazir Digon, that means I'm a Nazir for 2 terms, which means 60 days. Trigon, so again Trigon, 3 terms. Tachrigon, Arba, 4 terms. Pantigon, I'm a Nazir Pantigon, right? 5 terms. Fine. Tanrabanan, Bayis Agol. So I will say if you have a round house, a round home, or Digon, or a house with 2 corners, or Trigon, or a house with 3 corners, or Pantigon, or a house with 5 corners, Eno Metame Benigoim. It does not contract Tumas Saras. In order for a home to become afflicted with saras, the home has to have 4 corners. Tatrigon v'tayim benagam. If the house has 4 corners, it contracts saras. So the Gemara says, "Whoa, from where do you get that from?" The Tanrabanan is the Tanrabanan because we learned lemalo omer kir kiros. I will say it's interesting. In the section of saras abatim, the home getting saras. See, interestingly enough, the pasuk could have said kir, talking about some type of discoloration on the wall, singular. Instead of saying wall, it says walls, plural, and it does this twice. Kir, kiros, shtayim, right? Kir, kiros, shtayim. Lamata omer, kir, kiros, shtayim, harikan arba. The Torah in 2 places, instead of saying wall singular, uses wall plural. The minimum definition of walls is 2. It says walls twice. What does that teach you? 4 walls, 4 corners. In order for a house to contract tumas saras, has to be a house of 4 corners. Therefore, again, round house, no saras. 3 corners, no saras. 5 corners, no saras. 4 corners, saras. Homa kosher das la kamei the Rebbe. We'll say great story here. There was a get makosher that came before Rebbe. By the way, I just want to point out. So if you notice again, what's the catalyst of Rebbe? Rebbe originally was not an expert in this. And then what happened? What did he do? He learned. He learned something amazing. You want to become proficient in something, apply yourself, spend the time, learn, and you will acquire the proficiency. Incredible. So the Gemara says, listen to this. There was this Gemara that came before Rabbi. V'amar Rabbi, ein zman baza. Rabbi said, there's no date. There's no date in this. Amar Rabbi Shimon Rabbi the Rabbi, Shema ben Ksharav Movla. Maybe the date is there. Remember, when I get Makosher, it's sewn shut. Maybe the date is like tucked in deep in one of the folds. So sure enough, Palye Bechazye. So Rebbe opened up the shtar, and sure enough, he saw the date was inside one of the folds. Chazer be Rebbe bebishus. So Rebbe says, listen to this. So Rebbe looked at Reb Shimon. He looked at him a little bit angrily, like annoyed. So what happened? Amrale lavana kasve. So this is great. So Reb Shimon says, hey, I didn't write it. In other words, it wasn't me. Rabbi Yehuda Chayta Kasve. It was Rabbi Yehuda Chayta wrote it. So listen to this. So to which Rabbi says, Amarlei Kelecha Milashon Hara. Why are you talking Lashon Hara? So Rabbi says, okay, I'm annoyed because this is not the way to write a shtar, right? This is not the way to do this. But there's absolutely no need for you to throw someone else under the bus. No need to speak Lashon Hara about Rabbi Yehuda. Incredible. Zimnin, I'll say another story. Zimnin, Havi Yosef Kamei, Veka Pasik Sidra B'Sefer Tehillim. I'll say it's so beautiful. So one time, once again, Rabbi Shimon was sitting in front of Rebbe, and Rebbe finished reading Sefer Tehillim. It's so beautiful. So I'll say, I just want to point out, remember, Rebbe was a direct descendant of David HaMelech. Right, so a very beautiful idea over here. The power, in general, the power of saying Tehillim. So Rebbe finished reading Sefer Tehillim. Amar Rebbe, Kama miyushar ksavzeh. Rebbe said, obviously, how was he reading Sefer Tehillim? Somebody wrote. It's actually quite beautiful. If you go to the kever of David HaMelech, people don't realize David HaMelech is buried in the old city of Yerushalayim. Right? If you walk, right outside of Shar Tzion. Right, you walk right outside of Shar Tzion. You walk past. There's like a huge, like a monastery zach over there. Right, you walk past that, and there's the kever of David HaMelech. I remember in Yerushalayim, I always love to go on Shabbos afternoon to go to kever of David HaMelech. There they have a beautiful, beautiful Sefer Tehillim written on a scroll. Written on a scroll. It is the most I don't know, I've never seen anyone who has like a scroll of Sefer Tehillim. I'm not dropping any hints or anything. I'm just saying, whatever. Happens to be magnificently beautiful. So I'll say, so Lamaisa, so it's there. So that's how they had Sefer Tehillim, right? Sefer Tehillim wasn't like right. We have a Sefer Tehillim written in a scroll. So Rebbe was reading a beautiful Sefer Tehillim. So the Gemara says, so I'm Rebbe, Kam Yushar Ksavzeh. So Rabbi Shimon says to him, Ana love Kasivna. I didn't write it. Yehuda Chaita Kasvei. Yehuda Chaita wrote it. So Amrulei Kilecha Milashon Harazeh. So Rebbe said, stop speaking Lashon Hara. So Gemara said, 1 second, what's going on over here? Bishlama Hasam Ika Lashon Hara. So I understand in the first case, by the get Makusher, there was Lashon Hara, right? Because Rebbe was very displeased about how the star was written, right? Rabbi Shimon says it wasn't me, it was Rabbi Yehuda Chaita. So I understand, that's Lashon Hara. Elahacha my Lashon Hara Ika. Why is there Lashon Hara over here, right? In the case over here, where again Rebbe was complimenting the Sefer Tehillim. So Rabbi say this is pretty incredible. The Gemara says, Elahacha my Lashon Hara Ika, Mishum Rav Dimi. The Tani Rav Dimi Achod Rav Safra, Li Olam Al Yisaper Adam Betavasa Shachavera. You should never speak too much positively about a person. Why not? Shemitoch tovaso bali deira aso. Because I will say, when you end up speaking very positively about a person, what's going to end up happening? What's going to end up happening? Somewhat. There's the but, right? It's so great, but I will say, what does Rav Dimi say? Just don't talk about people. Just don't talk about people. Talk about yourself. Not like that, right? In other words, focus on yourself. Focus on what you're going to do with your life. Focus on your accomplishments. Focus on your changes. Don't spend your time talking about other people, even if it's positive. Because we'll say, we've all been involved in conversations like this, right? Where I only have the nicest thing to say. And suddenly, again, an unexpected turn in this conversation that I did not anticipate. And suddenly, again, mamish in the depths of Lashon Hara. So Rav Dimi says, there's an easy way to deal with this. Just don't talk about people, even in a positive way, because Lamaisa, again, you may end up chas v'shalom in the midst of Lashon Hara. Now, I just want to point out, never chas v'shalom confuse this with not giving compliments. It's always important to give compliments to people. Really what it means is don't talk about other people. You should always compliment people to themselves. That's always good to build up other people. Just don't talk about other people to other people, even if it's l'shvach, even if it's in a complimentary way, because chas v'shalom may come to Lashon Hara. Both sides finish up. Incredible Gemara. Amrav, Shalosh Averos ein Adam nitzal mehen. There are 3 Averos that no person is saved from, which means 3 Averos that every person commits. B'chol yom, right? 3 averos that we commit every day. Number 1, hir hur avera, right? Right? Thoughts about avera, desire, right? The desirous, lustful thoughts about avera. No person escapes that. Every single person deals with that every single day. V'iyun tefillah. So I'll say, what's iyun tefillah? So here, the machlokes Rashbam and Tosas. Tosas says davening without kavanah. Incredible. It's in the middle of Tosas. Nira the Rebbe, Diyun Tila Shehura, Shina Mechuvanim Tfilasam. Tosas says not having kavana. The Rashbam goes with the idea that a person davens and a person is so confident in their tfilos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give them everything they asked for, and they wait for the fulfillment of their tfilos. Right, and I will say, and that's probably it's theologically problematic because that's not how tefillah works. I daven for something. Hakadosh Baruch Hu may say yes, he may say no, because there's a whole bunch of other considerations that are rolled into this. So to daven and to expect the immediate fulfillment of my tefillos is spiritually immature, right? Spiritually immature and theologically false. And this is a mistake that people make every single day. Oh, I daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I put in my pin, right? I put in my pin in the ATM. Of course, I'm going to get out what I want. That's false. That's false, spiritually immature, and theologically inaccurate. There says, Iyun Tefillah, V'Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara. So I will say 3 things that Chol Adam, every single person commits every single day. Lustful thoughts about sin. Iyun Tefillah, either again davening without kavana or immediate expectation that tefillos are going to be fulfilled. And Lashon Hara. The Gemara says Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, really? A person, the first 2 I get. Person speaks Lashon Hara every single day. Ella avak Lashon Hara. So we'll say avak Lashon Hara means, again, there's a whole halachic category of this, but avak Lashon Hara essentially means as follows, that halacha l'maisa, It's not direct lashon hara, but rather again, it's like, we'll call it like associated lashon hara. In other words, like we just saw before, I'm speaking positively about someone, and then the conversation turns in such a negative way. That's avak lashon hara. Both let's finish up. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Rov begezel, umiyat ba'arayos. Most people steal. In other words, what that means is most people, not like actively steal, but engage in some form of theft. Miut ba'arayos, a significant minority engage in immorality. V'hakol b'lashon hara. Everyone speaks lashon hara. The Gemara says, really? Everyone? B'lashon hara sakanaytcha ela avak lashon hara. No, it's not true. No, I was supposed to say at the end of the day, not everyone speaks lashon hara, but everyone is involved in some form of lashon hara. Direct lashon hara, indirect lashon hara. I'll just end with the following. Asks the Marsha. I don't understand. If you tell me that at the end of the day, shalosh averos ein adam nitzol mehem. 3 averos you can't be saved from. Rabbi say, if I can't be saved from it, then what? Then why should I be culpable? If I can't be saved, why should I be culpable? So listen to this. Says the Marsha, get ready for this. Look at the Gemara. Shalosh averos ein adam. Adam, says the Marsha. What's an adam? Adam is someone who is like the Adama. If I don't work on myself enough, and I'm closer to the earth than I am to the heavens. If I don't work on myself, so I am a base individual, I don't actualize the ruchnius that I am capable of actualizing. If I am just an Adam and not an Ish, if I am just a person who's more rooted in the physicality of the earth than of the beautiful Kedusha of the heavens, then every single day I will be nechshol mizaveros. Then I can't escape it. But if I work on myself, to elevate myself, to free myself from the clutches of the Adama, to become the best version of myself, to self-actualize, to work on my ruchnius, then I can transcend. Only an Adam is constantly stuck in the clutches of these Averos. But someone who perpetually works on himself to free himself from the clutches of the earth and to become something even greater, even holier, such a person has the ability to escape the clutches, even of these Averos, that most people fall prey to. Shkar Chavosai. All right, Chevra on Zoom, have a wonderful day. Good Shabbos, everyone. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos. All right, Eretz Yisrael, Chevra. I'm going to send out information. I'm going to be in Eretz Yisrael for 36 hours next week. We're having a special Daf Yomi shir at Reb Jerry's home. Information to come is going to be on Wednesday. A lunch and learn Daf Yomi in Eretz Hashem. More information to come. Shkach, everyone, a good Shabbos. Morning, Yomi.
I was having this discussion with your family right before I went to sleep last night. She told me in school they taught her